Hey everybody, welcome to the Mr. Maple Show. I'm Brian.
And I'm Tim. And we're MrMaple.com, mail order business in Western North Carolina with over 1,000 varieties of Japanese maples we ship directly to your door.
Make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Every day we're putting out new videos for you guys just to kind of break down each cultivar that we have here available. And today we're talking about some heat tolerant Japanese maples. I mean, I'm from the south of Oklahoma, and so I know a little something about growing Japanese maples in the heat.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I'm excited to get to talk about this today.
And we've been selling Japanese maples to high heat areas for years here at Mr. Maple. We've got a lot of customers we'd go visit all the time when we'd be at garden shows who have a lot of these selections we'll be talking about today. Make sure, like you said, like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is part 3 of the series. And we've got 2 other parts, so part 1 and part 2 of Japanese maples for high heat areas. Some good expert picks. Go check those out. Check out our video on the Heat Seeker series. That's some of our selections for high heat areas. And also go check out our tips for high heat areas. If you like Japanese maples and you're in a high heat area and you're watching this video, all those videos will really help you out.
Well, you know, I used to have people all the time ask me, man, you were able to grow Japanese maples in Oklahoma? How did you pull that off? And there were times I was like, man, you don't understand. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can approach that, and so many different cultivars that do extremely well in those type of climates. And so I guess we'll start here on the table, and first up we've got is Acer Palmatum Emerald Lace.
Yeah, Emerald Lace. It was found in Charlotte, North Carolina, introduced by the famous Del Laux in Oregon, and this plant is now around the world. What did you like about Emerald Lace growing it in Oklahoma?
Emerald Lace, for me, performed very well. And one of the things I really like about it, probably my favorite things, is just its shape. You know, like overall, it has this crazy spreading habit to it. It gets more wide than it does tall, you know, and just these reaching and arching branches on that. And just the foliage on that is just amazing too. And, you know, just something very airy about that, you know, that extremely dissected leaf on that is probably one of my favorite in the lace leaf category for sure.
Yeah, it definitely has that lace leaf almost like a cereal. Mm-hmm. And it does have that crazy wonky habit that just gives it something unique. Every time you see an emerald lace, it's very different and very special.
For sure.
I like it because it's a green lace leaf that gives you a red fall color. Mm-hmm. So if you've got other lace leaves out there that go to yellows or oranges like a lot of green lace leaves do, this one can go out there and look very similar during the spring and the summer, but then give you a different fall color.
Right.
And you know, it's a fairly heat tolerant one. I think when we talked with Ken Rogers, it was one of his recommendations for high heat areas too. And it's definitely one that I like a lot just because it's very different from a lot of the other green lace leaves that are out there.
When you think of that lace leaf in Japanese maples, I mean, typically you're going to think of something like a Tamukiyama or something like that. This gives you something outside of that box. It's going to be a little bit different feel to it. Just that really small and finely dissected leaf on it, it just gives it an extra something in its appearance. You know, it's going to stand out amongst the other lace leaves that you might have. And like you said, that fall color going to red, if you plant this next to like a waterfall or something like that, you're going to get a stark contrast for that.
Now this next one we've got on the table, Brian, this was, when you came to visit from Oklahoma, this was the very first video that you got to be in.
Yeah.
Brian came to visit from Oklahoma and was just coming to visit. We didn't know he'd be coming back later to stick around with us. And we said, hey, you want to be one of our videos? And we're at Hillstone Arboretum and we shot a video on Hefners Red, Acer Palmatum Hefners Red.
Hefners Red, I mean, I used to get asked all the time, what's your favorite red upright for growing in the high heat areas? And I always said Hefners Red. And what's kind of ironic about that is, from what I understand and learned, is that this was found in a nursery here in North Carolina.
Yeah, I know.
So like, for some reason I had this connection with North Carolina, I didn't even realize it. But you know, this is a great plant for high heat areas. I had this in full sun. What I was really impressed with this is just how well it held its color throughout the season. I mean, it really has a striking red color that kind of varies from other red uprights. And I think its overall just performance in high heat just really impressed me. I mean, I had this out where it got all day sun and just baked out there in the Oklahoma heat, and it handled it, never got a leaf burn on that, and a great grower.
the funny thing is when we would go down to nurseries down in Texas, which we'll talk about here in a minute, Hefner's Red was our trade bait.
Yeah.
Because we're like, we've got this super high heat plant. We're going to take it down there because they could really use this upright red that's super heat tolerant that holds its color real well throughout the summer.
Yeah.
And so we would take 1 gallon of Hefner's Red as trade bait to go trade with nurseries to get other cool plants that they were growing in those high heat areas. And it's definitely an upright Japanese maple, like you said, from Hefner's Nursery, which is, you know, here in Western North Carolina, and oddly enough, just super, super heat tolerant. Found as a chance seedling, and then when people started growing it, they started realizing how great this plant actually was. And it's one of the best red uprights when it comes to upright reds that are going to hold its color extremely well.
Absolutely. Amazing plant for sure. Next up on the table, we've got Acer Palmatum Baton Rouge.
And that was one of the plants we took to use as trade bait, was the Hefner's Red down to go pick up Baton Rouge.
Some Baton Rouge.
Down in Houston, Texas. Matt and I heard of this coral bark down there, and we got hotels, drove extra out of our way when the Maple Society had their meeting in Dallas-Fort Worth area. We drove out of our way down to Warren, Texas, which is down near Houston, and found Dreamus Nursery, who had Baton Rouge. And, you know, we did everything we could to get as many of those as we could, get them back in production. We got them to other nurseries so they could get it into production, because this is a coral bark selection from Warren, Texas, that shows its bark really well in high heat. It's extremely heat tolerant overall.
Yeah.
And it can give you more of a red fall color. I mean, it can really get some good red fall colors on it, which more so than a typical Sengu Kaku.
Absolutely. You know, this is a very, very special coral bark. I think, you know, whenever I was going through the nursery this year, taking pictures, I was always kind of gravitating towards the Baton Rouge because it just gave some amazing colors. I mean, some of that spring growth is like this bright orange highlights on that. You know, something you don't really see when you get to compare it to
You did get some good captures of that this spring.
I mean, it really, really did stand out. And then, like you said, you get a different fall color than you get like from a Sengu Kaku. That to me just, I mean, imagine pairing those two together would be a great pairing on that for sure, just because you have that coral bark interest, but you'd also have those variants in colors in spring, even in fall.
And Baton Rouge, the name means red stick or red twig, and people automatically think Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Yeah.
And we saw a lot of these to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And it's a great plant for that because it's very heat tolerant.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a perfectly named plant because it makes people think the South, and the name means red stick or red twig, which this is a coral bark selection. And so I love the name on this one. It's one that we've really popularized here. We didn't introduce it here at Mr. Maple, but we helped get it more popular in the United States. And it's a plant I definitely really like. So next up we have Acer Palmatum dissectum Firefall. And this is a plant that I love. It's a little more cherry picked up in the cherry red picked up in the springtime. Really nice maroon during the summer and a bright red during the fall. It's extremely, it's got that cascading umbrella habit, and it's a plant that's extremely, extremely heat tolerant. A lot of our photos are from Walter Butts, and he has allowed us to use a lot of his photos, and he's in some of those high heat areas in South Carolina, and his plant has thrived and done well, and even a sunnier location. And everybody who grows this plant is really impressed because, to me, it's one of the best weeping red lace leaves that you can do, but it's also a newer one. So a lot of people don't know that name, Firefall.
Right.
You know, you may have heard of Fireball, but they don't know Acer Palmatum dissectum Firefall. And then lastly, we've got Sukkasa Silhouette.
Sukkasa Silhouette, I'll tell you this. So I have a great friend named Bob Taylor. I'm going to shout out to Bob Taylor. Many, many years ago, he got me into Japanese maples, and he had a specimen of this in his garden that every single time I went out there, I was just like, man, that thing is absolutely beautiful. It gives such a presence in it once it starts to mature. Just that silhouette that you see out there in the garden, the name fits it absolutely perfectly. It makes a big statement out there, but you can also fit it into those narrow spaces because you got that narrow shape on it.
And you want to give Sukkasa Silhouette some sunlight. If you grow it in more shade, it will start arching, branching out. And I see a lot of people make that mistake with Sukkasa Silhouette, thinking, oh, Japanese maples need protection from the afternoon sun. Sukkasa Silhouette is one of the most heat-tolerant Japanese maples we do. And it grows very fast, it grows very narrow, And it's a selection by Yutaka Tanaka at Sukkasa Maple, one of our good friends in Japan. Just really has that nice, narrow habit. And in Japan, they use this plant as a street tree.
Right, yeah.
And this one gives you some amazing, good fall color with some really nice shades of red. But awesome plant, the Sukkasa Silhouette. If you're looking for heat tolerant, there's not one that, I mean, it's one of the most heat tolerant Japanese maples that we do. Can definitely handle a little more sun than, you know, even some of the most heat tolerant ones we're talking about here. It's kind of like the one on the table here that I would say is probably one of the most heat tolerant ones on the table.
Yeah.
And it gives you good fall color, narrow shape. Japanese maple that is extremely, I mean, on that extreme end of heat tolerance of Japanese maples. Definitely pretty cool. So Brian, out of these here, which are your favorite for the Oklahoma garden? Because I know you grew a bunch in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I did. I mean, you know, just probably for the pair, if I was to do a pair, just the amazing contrast would be Hefners Red and the Emerald Lace. I think those two just have an amazing shape and form, and just when you think about the contrast and difference between, I mean, these are two Japanese maples, but they look absolutely nothing alike. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it just really shows you the diversity that you can have within the same species. It's just an amazing way to showcase what Japanese maples can look like and what they can be. And if you're in the South, I mean, you know, you can really shock some people just by a variety of Japanese maples that you have. You know, sometimes you think, well, I can only grow X, Y, and Z in a high heat area. Well, we're kind of showcasing you guys what you can grow, all the different cultivars that you can grow in those really high heat areas. I think it's important to show that diversity that you can do with that.
And I think a lot of people know Japanese maples, and the first thing their garden center tells them is, oh, this one's not very heat tolerant.
Yeah.
Well, they're stuck on some of the most basic varieties that are out there that are very, very common.
Yeah.
Something like a Crimson Queen that may burn in more sunlight conditions. And then when you pick some of these other selections we're talking about, you can have something very similar like in Firefall that can handle more sunlight conditions or can handle a much higher heat situation. And so I think it's really important for people to realize, you know, there's a Japanese maple for every spot, but every Japanese maple is different. And when you look at these high heat Japanese maples, it can really get people into gardening and into growing Japanese maples in places like Oklahoma.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important to showcase what you can do with Japanese maples in all different kinds of climates. And I'm glad we're kind of highlighting these high heat areas. It's something I know a lot about when it comes to growing Japanese maples. We really appreciate you guys tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed this lineup. Take care.
God bless.
And have a great day.